Sometimes I like to dig through my old comments on my videos for ideas on what to review next, because y'all really want me to talk about your favorite show, and I think that's just amazing. Like, seriously, no one really asks for my opinion on things like y'all do. It's like I'm important or something. And let's not bask in on this stature of importance for too long, though. Username the 22nd suggested I look at two properties, Kemono Friends and Show by Rock. Since I've already talked about a Sanrio property in my last proper How Furry review, I'll save it for later and talk about Kemono Friends. This show certainly is popular and a thing. I actually didn't really get into it when it first came out, instead diving right into Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, and y'all know how I feel about that amazing series. But looking at it again, I think I see it differently now. How differently, you may ask? Are there any hidden messages or subtexts about man's relationship with nature and animals? Is it at all educational about the animal species featured in it? And ultimately, so imagine a perfectly sunny day in the savannah. You wake up from a slumber, and you find yourself face to face with a ferocious feline. Yeah, we got ourselves another one of those Kemono Mimi shows. Those are definitely a lot more popular in Japan than in the US for the sole reason that cute anime human girls sell a lot more than furry ones. I say definitely, but that's just my guess. More on that later. So we have a human who doesn't know her own name, where she is, or why she's even here, at this big ol' savannah area. So she and this serval-cat, and that's serval, not sergal, head out of the savannah in search of knowledge, like learning what kind of animal kaban-chan is and where her species resides along this giant animal friend-filled amusement park island. Is also kind of abandoned as foreshadowed in the ending segments, but more on that much later in the spoiler section. There's a certain structure for each episode of this series. You have Kaban and Serval exploring a new area with the new species, or three, of friends, the anthropomorphic anime girls, to learn about. And there are no actual animals on this island, just lots of Kemono Mimis. And the show explains why throughout the series, much later. As they're introduced, however, you have the full name of whatever new friend shows up, along with its genus and family, and depending on how relevant they are to the plot of each episode, they tend to stick around and act like cute anime girls. Usually there's some problem to fix or a quibble or argument to solve through Kaban's superior human thinking skills. See, while she's a timid girl, she usually pipes in at the right time and is like, hey, have you tried this yet? I'm not sure if it'll actually work, but just do it. And it works out 99% of the time, but if it doesn't, Kaban or one of the animal friends usually has another great idea that works, and everything's hunky-dory. This format doesn't really realize itself until episode 2, and until the last 2 or 3 episodes of the series. It has this more mellow, light-hearted tone to it, which kind of drags a little bit. Having a format doesn't automatically mean that the show drags, though. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a formatted YouTube video series. But like, there's not a lot of tension until much later in the last 2 or 3 episodes when it just ramps the hell up. You have these weird amorphous creatures called ceruleans that try to attack and eat any living thing in their path. And they don't show up a whole lot, which could be used to show how truly menacing they are, like boss fights or mini-bosses or whatever you call it in a video game. You know, guys like the video games. But I honestly expected more encounters from them throughout this journey. This show has a more lighthearted and kid-friendly tone otherwise, since I'm pretty sure this is actually just a cartoon for children. Don't tell that to the nerds with the serval-chan body pillows. But somehow it just feels a tad slow or dull, and I think one of the reasons for that is something I've been dancing around. It's this god-awful animation. Sorry to be blunt about it. I think they took whatever animation software that Rooster Teeth's Ruby is made in, and they were like, hey, that looks cool. Let's make an edutainment show with this software. This will be amazing! But then you have a series of excellently made backgrounds made in 2D, with the occasional 3D water effect or something. And in the foreground, a bunch of cel-shaded 3D models, dancing around like puppets at like 6 to 12 frames per second. See, they try to apply the normal keyframe animation techniques you use in anime, the 2D form, but here it just does not work that well, even in more action-packed scenes. For the most part, scenes are just near lifeless 3D models staring at each other with their hands or other objects clipping right into their bodies, just standing there, barely blinking, staring at each other with their mouths, going through a 3-frame cycle that just kind of jumps and stretches between these frames. What I'm trying to say, if this seems too complicated, I'll just trim it down to this. It looks amateurish. When you have scenes where they're just talking to each other and the voice actresses are trying to do their best to carry a scene when barely anything moves for at least 15 seconds, there are some scenes where it actually just looks like a PowerPoint presentation. That's what initially turned me off from the series at the start. And I know that sounds terrible to say, and a lot of people love this show, but that's just my opinion, you know. If I didn't know I was reviewing this series, I probably would have just ignored it. Do I hate the series? I would not say as much, no. There are actually some really cool and cute characters that interact with each other, and I was kind of intrigued by the little mystery going on during the second half of the series. The music is pretty phenomenal and gives me Azumanga Daioh vibes. I was wondering if it was the same guy, but no, this is some completely new composer that also did the music for that anime with the sex ed Antifa. It's a great show, you should check it out though. If there was a show I would compare this to, it's Wildcrats, a show where 2 dudes and their 3 sidekick characters explore different regions of the world, learn about different animals each episode, fight off this kind of fashion-y scene-looking dude who's always doing some goofy shit, normal stuff for American cartoons. See, Kemono Friends uses the moe anime girl tropes to humanize their selected animals and learn more about their real-life animal counterparts, while kind of exaggerating their aspects, in a way. But Wildcrats has these exosuits that take all the animal's special abilities, body shape, physical disadvantages, and so forth, so that the protagonist duo get to actually feel like what it is to be this animal after observing it in the wild. In terms of writing devices, I personally prefer the Wildcrats method. It's a little bit more immersive and creative, but I might talk more about that when I discuss how furry Kemono Friends is. But right now, seems like a good time for spoilers, so go ahead and skip ahead to this point in the timeline to avoid being spoiled. Something about this show feels like there was a conflict of interest. Like, someone wanted to make a cutesy animal learning show, but then someone else on the writing team wanted to write some shonen anime bullshit. Because you go from little cute adventures about attracting new animals over to your coffee shop on the top of a mountain, to characters straight up sacrificing themselves, sometimes a little bit recklessly for each other. Trying to defeat indescribable horrors. It's only made worse when the show doesn't actually follow through with these threats of character death either. There's 3 moments where this happens, and the character's just gonna be like, I'm gonna throw myself into danger because you're my best friends, and I'm feeling extra brave, and I don't care if I die because friendship. But then 5 seconds later, they're just like, hey, I didn't die. Hi. And everyone cheers, but then you're just kind of sitting there thinking, what was the point of that? The only thing that really dies are the ceruleans that they all beat up. I'm not saying you can't have moments of characters about to die, then making it out alive just in the last minute, but this is just ridiculous. Like, maybe I'm just used to shows like Attack on Titan, where characters just die for real all the time, especially in the first episode. But outside of that, there are some interesting ideas and concepts they could explore and make some kind of interesting statement with, like with using machines to recreate nature and how far science will go to understanding our natural world. But honestly, the show just doesn't do that. We have this magic tech that can turn organic and inorganic material into respectively either the missing link between man and animal that would give us a deeper understanding of our habitats and those who occupy it, or an amorphous monster that practically destroys everything else that's in its path and is also attracted to light for some reason. We also never get to see the first-hand process that causes this, and it's not too bad. But throughout the series, I get this really horrific, like, uncanny feeling about the whole thing, like we're seeing the aftermath of a post-apocalypse, and that there's this subcheck of how we basically destroyed the world through trying to learn more about it, like something to say about humans' hubris. But that fizzles out. once we defeat the big bad. Maybe I read too many depressing stories. Oh, also, after they defeat the big bad, there are still ceruleans roaming about, I'm assuming, because they didn't really kill them all. They kind of escaped some of them and forgot to kill them. Oh well. We also never really figure out if serval-chan actually remembers what happens to Mirai-san, if that's actually the same serval-chan, and if so, what happened to her memories of that incident? Like, is it trauma? Did she just watch her die right in front of her and is trying to forget about it? Like, that seems like the implication. Mirai just died right in front of her, Serval had no way to save her, and is blocking out that terrible memory, but that would require that memory to trigger once Serval finds the hat on the human, though. Said hat also miraculously had a human hair on it, like some sort of weird reincarnation or clone of Mirai-san. Does that mean they're twins or clones? I don't know. I think it'd be even weirder if it just started the human out as a baby. But no, it's a more appropriately aged girl for that weird scene at the hot springs where they just take off all their clothes after realizing, wait, this isn't fur, this is clothing. I could just take this off? I'm just gonna strip down. That was probably the funniest moment of the series, actually. That's it for spoilers, because I'm slowly derailing into madness and nitpicking. Now let's get back on the course. Overall, we have an anime that once you finally kinda stick with it, it's not all that bad, but I wouldn't call it groundbreaking. I didn't hate watching it, it kept me entertained throughout, but I can't tell whether how much of that was genuine enjoyment or a, wow, you really animated it like that? Kind of so bad it's good enjoyment. I'm trying my best to be positive and be like, not one of those negative Nancys. So I guess I'll call this an adorable train wreck. But the train was filled with cute characters that all survived and lived happily ever after. But now comes the more important question, how furry is it? Let's examine this poorly animated 3D tale using my C.H.A.N.C.E system, a handy rubric I use to break down furry aspects in media, those being cast, harmony, anthropocentrism, narrative, commonality, and expression. Let's start with cast, or how many narratively important characters that are furry. We follow serval-chan and kaban-chan around for the most part, but there are some other friends that show up in more than one episode, so I guess that counts. I don't know what to classify the little tour guide thing. I forgot to mention that before. There's a little tour guide thing, and it follows them around, and all the animal friends call it boss. It's literally the only male character in this series. From what you can probably guess, though, there's a whole lot of furry going on, plus the one human. I'm kind of wondering if the show would be any different if, like Wild Kratts, it would just be a pair of humans meeting and befriending these friends, rather than just the human and the serval going on shenanigans. It might put too much focus on how the humans react and understand this world and detract from the more human elements or furry aspects of these kimono mimis, and how to connect those. So I guess it works well this way. If you're new to the series, it must seem weird that I'm talking about starkly human characters with barely any animal features, along with some clothing inspired by their giving species, and hairdos and all that. But under this roof, we consider kimono mimi as furry. So with a human, a serval cat, a couple of owls, a fennec fox, a raccoon that keeps following them around, it's not a complete fur fest, but it does rank up to a 3.5 out of 4. Next is harmony, or how natural the furries are to this setting. Given that this is a giant amusement park island thing, and the anthros featured on this island are basically part of the attraction as a way for people to humanize or appreciate the animals even more, I think. I don't think I'm 100% clear on the need for their existence, outside of creating a literal human zoo, but they truly do all inhabit this place naturally, as you would with a island that's noticeably dilapidated and abandoned, with not much else to do or nowhere else reasonably close to go to. Appropriately so, they all stay within a habitat that suits their previously preferred environment, like owls inside a tree library, or a tsundere buggy in a dark maze, or even a couple of foxes near a hot spring where they can get all hot and steamy, as you would, you dang foxes. And since this is basically edutainment, that's educational entertainment, they have to get their stuff right, so being naturally integrated means a 4 out of 4. Moving on to anthropocentrism, or how close these anthros are to being human, I think it's kind of obvious from their appearance, but what about their behavior? They all communicate and emote like humans do, even give off unique and individual personalities, sort of based on their animal features and habits. Serval-chan, for example, is a little headstrong and rushes right into situations, very curious all the time, even if she doesn't understand everything right away, and generally seems to be happy to be alive. Now, I haven't personally met too many serval cats, but I'd say this fits with her being a feline at least. There's a shoehorn bill that has an unfortunate case of resting meanie face, but is also very shy and reserved, probably self-conscious about her face. There's the lioness who likes a good battle but would rather lounge and do nothing all day, which is actually more of a male lion trait, come to think of it. But you see my point. They have a few traits borrowed from their other animal selves, but act mostly human, which leads me to a 3 out of 4. And next is narrative, or how important these furries' animal nature is to the narrative. The core narrative seems to be more about Kaban going through a self-realizing and self-learning journey with the help of these animal Kemono friends, and that just makes it more of a human-centric story, with the anthros just in the midst of it. Another part of the show is learning about Japari Park and what happened to it, and while that has elements of learning more about nature and animals and all that, it's still from the human point of view, because this is kind of like a human problem that's mainly solved through another human, but with the help of animals. I'm not talking about a more meta human point of view either, where the audience, humans, learns about nature and gains entertainment from it, but it's also just literally from kaban-chan, as a human, learning all of this as well. There are even segments that show up when a commercial break would be, where it's just a zoologist talking about what an actual animal of the species is like.
Target cat is a very special cat. They live only in the treetops. They don't come down to the ground. They're strictly treetop cats. They eat rats, lizards.
Now, having a human in the center of the story is a good device to use when you want your audience to get more involved with what's going on in your show, like you're walking into your character's shoes, but it's not that furry, is it? I'm calling this a 2 out of 4. Then we have commonality, or how prevalent anthros are outside of the main cast. Not much to this quality outside of, yeah, they're prevalent. That's the main draw of the show. I know I just explained this before, but this is a more human-centric narrative. But the animal abundance running around here in these habitats makes up for it, kind of. There's actually a segment in episode 2 where they just like blitz right through a bunch of friends on this trek through a jungle area. Hey, over here. Oh, my 5 seconds are up. Bye. It's funny because there's no other scene like this in the rest of the series, because all the other Kemono girls, they are all girls, might I remind you, no male character in the series besides Boss, are given stuff like character development, arcs, proper introductions. So in terms of commonality, with all these Kemono friends running around, I'm going to give it a solid 3.5 out of 4. Finally, we have expression, or how furry they actually look. I might have touched on this before, call it a hunch, but they don't look very furry. The only fur on the Kemono friends are the hair on their heads, their big fluffy ears, their proportionately sized tails, and their appropriate looking clothing. I'm still disappointed that they couldn't make a Kemono boy or Kemono man, or a Kemono woman, but maybe they just wanted to be cheap, lazy, or both, and just use nothing but the default girl model for the rest of the show, and then just slap on as many features that they can to differentiate it. Could just be to appeal to all the moe anime obsessed nerds, which is a popular market to pander to, and maybe I'm a bit biased, but I know for a fact that there is a demographic for more furred up anime girls. That's one of the reasons I didn't immediately pick up on the show as well for the first time around. It seemed like just nothing but cute anime girls doing stuff, and it wasn't that interesting, and that's not really why I watch anime. There is some of that in Kemono Friends, but it has this almost cynical amount of anime cuteness as well. Let's get back on topic though. So we have a real lack of fur on the actual furry characters, so unfortunately it's going to be a 1 out of 4. After a tally of each score, we have a total of 17 out of 24. Which is a bit higher than I had initially expected. Not that I had low expectations for this show. This anime was a nice waste of time. I'm not very good at pulling my punches, aren't I? Like, I mean this in a good way, don't worry, don't set my comment section on fire. Though if you must do it just so it'll help the video appear higher on the YouTube algorithm and search results. Best girls in my opinion are the owls, the bug, the shoehorn bill, and I guess Serval is okay. I don't really have any ships. I mean, I guess I could see Servo and Kaban. And since it is Pride Month, I didn't really see any queer coding. If you don't know what queer coding is, it's essentially when characters are more implied or subtly giving out their non-hetero feelings in the show, but it's never outwardly expressed at all. And yeah, not really my cup of tea with the weird tonal issues and the lacking animation, but I did enjoy this show for what it is. This has been Gregor, scientifically funded Neko Girl Research Reindeer, with How Furry Is It? Click on the like button if you enjoyed what you saw, and subscribe and hit the bell icon if you want to see more anthro analysis and antler antics. And since you're still here, go ahead and check out my Patreon page. Patreon lets you pay creators like me directly through a monthly paid subscription, and if you're generous enough, you can even have your name in the credits before each review, or help me co-produce a review. I also have a special Discord server for my patrons, but you can also send me single donations through Ko-fi, that's Ko-Fi, and as always, thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.